Welcome to the Where Do Gays Retire podcast, where we help you in the LGBTQ plus community find a safe and affordable retirement place. Join Mark Goldstein as he interviews others who live in gay-friendly places around the globe. Learn about the climate, cost of living, healthcare, crime and safety, and more. Now, here's your host, Mark Goldstein.
If you ever wondered what it's like to retire in Detroit, Michigan, stay tuned and stay to the end. We have our special guest today, Jac Blanco. And Jac was born in Miami, Florida. However, soon after he was born, his family relocated to New Jersey and was raised in the New York City metro area of Bergen County, New Jersey. Jac lived in New Jersey until 2010, when he relocated to Chattanooga, Tennessee for a job opportunity. Jac met his current partner, Shane, in 2014 while living in Chattanooga. In March of 2016, Jac and Shane relocated for another job opportunity to Detroit, Michigan. They now live in Palmer Woods, a historic neighborhood in Detroit, and are restoring their 103-year-old greenhouse conservatory. Yeah. That's quite a job, I'm sure. Jac enjoys working out, gardening, home restorations and decorating, traveling, theater, opera, and dining out. In 2021, Jac was appointed to the Michigan Hispanic Chamber of Commerce Board of Directors, and in 2022, he was elected to the board as corporate vice chair of the Board of Directors for the MHCC. Jac has two grown children from a previous marriage, and he also earned a Bachelor's of Arts degree from New Jersey City State University. He's still working and has plans to retire in a few years. I'm sure you're looking forward to that. Mm-hmm. So welcome, Jac. Welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for coming.
Well, thank you, Mark. Thank you for inviting me.
Of course. We'll start off with climate and climate change. How would you describe the climate in Detroit? Does it experience extreme weather conditions? Is the winter very cold and snowy?
So I guess obviously we have the four seasons, and to some people that's really, really great. The winters can be cold, although the past several years or so, they haven't been as cold as they have been in the past when I first moved here. From a climate change perspective, I don't think we've really noticed much of a difference other than maybe summer rainstorms tend to be heavier, where they will cause some area flooding. But there hasn't been like extreme heats or extremely bitter cold winters either. The last time I remember a really bitter cold winter where it was in the single digits or below zero for an extended period of time was several years ago. The summers are wonderful here. They're just absolutely beautiful summers. Some people would say they're a bit humid, but being from the New York City metro area, it's extremely humid. So I don't think that it's as humid here, but the summers here are known to be really just beautiful days, beautiful weather here, especially when you go up north of the state. But yeah, I just love the summers here. So.
And the winters, how much snow do you think you get on average?
Yeah, that's I'm glad you brought that up. So Detroit, when we moved here to Detroit, people right away, oh my God, you hate the snow. Why are you moving there? And so Detroit is actually in a microclimate. And so we get the opposite effect for example, we don't get lake effect snow. We get exactly the opposite because Detroit is tucked between two lakes, actually kind of three. It's Lake Huron and it's Lake Erie, and then there's Lake St. Clair, and that regulates the weather in the city of Detroit. So we never really get any big snowstorms. So I'm from the northeast part of New Jersey, about an hour outside New York. And it was not uncommon to get
a foot.
2 feet of snow.
Yeah.
And then a week later, get another foot of snow, and so forth. The largest snowstorm in the 8 years that we've lived here was one snowstorm that we had 8 inches of snow. Typically, when we get snow, it's just an inch, 2 inches tops. And the other nice thing about it is that the city is very flat, so it's not really hilly, and you don't have that hazard as well dealing with steep hills like what we had to deal with in New Jersey.
That's a plus.
So yeah, from the winters, they do get cold, just like the Northeast, but we don't get that big snowfall. I mean, you travel just 45 minutes to an hour outside of Detroit, then you'll
Get snow.
get a lot more snow. And then the west side of the state that's where they get the lake effect snow. But the city of Detroit is, like I said, it's a microclimate, and so we don't get much snow.
That's
What
great.
it does happen is that the snow doesn't melt, and then another few days later you get another inch or two, and then it just builds up slowly throughout the winter until we get a warming trend. So that's the difference. Yeah.
Okay, so I can definitely live with that. I said, I was done with the Northeast because that's where I'm originally from, and the snow as well. But now you got to give and take a little bit. So I'm kind of like now, okay, as long as it's not 2 feet of snow all winter long on the ground, I'm good with that.
Yeah, and digging out of that can be just a nightmare sometimes.
Yeah. Do you know if the city of Detroit is doing anything or implementing anything to prepare for rising temperatures, flooding, or severe storms?
I don't know of anything in the works. I think they are addressing, because the storm drains of the city of Detroit are very old. So I know that they are working on certain areas of the city to manage that, because of the rain does tend to be heavier, especially in the summer. So our water bills went up because of that, because they're trying to upgrade the storm systems. So I know that that's one area that they're looking at, that's probably partially due to climate change.
Okay. All right. And can you give us a sense of geography of Detroit? Where is it located in the state of Michigan?
So it's kind of the southeast part of the state. And we are right on the border, the U.S. border. When you go to downtown, you literally can look across the Detroit River and see the Canadian flag flying across the river. So we border Windsor, Ontario, Canada, and there is an underground tunnel similar to like the Holland Tunnel or the Lincoln Tunnel into New York City. It goes under the Detroit River, and you drive through, and then you're in Canada.
In Canada?
Yep. And there's also a bridge that crosses. I think there's now 2 bridges because they're almost completing a new one. But yeah, so it's a lot of Detroiters will do day trips, and actually there are people that commute from the Windsor area of Canada to Detroit every day to work.
Wow. I wonder how that works on taxes.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Oh, yeah. Not just a different city, it's a different country.
Yeah.
So, okay.
And so the city, the geography of the city is very flat, but but the one, I guess one of the nice things that stands out is between the US and Canada, there's a great big island and before the bankruptcy, it was managed by the city of Detroit. It's a huge park area. And so you can get there by a bridge, by driving over, or you can bike over to Belle Isle. Since the bankruptcy, it's now a state-run park, and a lot of improvements and restoration has gone into the Belle Isle. And it's just a really wonderful asset to have so close to us in the city. There's actually a beach there. And then there's a lot of wonderful parks, and then also the conservatory. There's a large conservatory there that's been there since turn of the 20th century. It was built very early, 1904, I believe. This is just a beautiful conservatory, a big tourist attraction. There's also a beautiful little aquarium that was that's known to be the oldest aquarium in the country. And it's just an architectural jewel. It's very small, but you can be in and out of there within 20 to 30 minutes. But it's just really neat to see more from an architectural perspective, because it's just a really beautiful piece of architecture. And so that's like I think one of the standout features of the Detroit area is the Belle Isle.
Okay. It sounds good. Speaking of the bankruptcy, do you remember what year that Detroit?
I think it's 2012.
Okay.
I may be wrong, but I think it's 2012. So we moved here in 2016. So it was not too long after that. But I believe it was either 2012 or 2014.
When did it start? When did you notice it started making a comeback? Because it certainly made a comeback.
Yeah, I would say within like the year or two that we were here, we were seeing big changes. I mean, downtown, by the time we moved here, was pretty much back already. But since then, we've seen even more improvements. So downtown, friends of ours that have been here all their lives, they talk about how downtown was completely abandoned, and no one went there really. There were skyscrapers that date back to the 20s that were completely abandoned, and there were architectural gems in the city built during the Art Deco period and such. And a lot of those buildings are credited to Dan Gilbert, who owns Quicken Loans. He's a billionaire, and he bought up a lot of the real estate downtown and has completely turned them over, renovated them into
Smart man.
Yeah, and bought them dirt cheap. Literally was buying skyscrapers for $1 million.
That's crazy. And
Yeah.
you know that in such a big city like Detroit, I mean, I know it had its problems. And you had mentioned Detroit, and you were like, I'm not going to Detroit. Right. But you know that after the bankruptcy, that things are going to be really cheap and it's going to make a comeback.
Right.
So,
yeah. And
he was very smart.
I mean, the downtown is just really wonderful now. And on the weekends, it's packed with people out enjoying the evening, going to bars and restaurants and that sort of thing. So yeah, it's we've seen a lot of changes as well with the park system in Detroit. A lot of the parks were still needing a lot of love when we moved here, and they've come around now and been all restored or getting renovated. But yeah, the park system here is really wonderful too.
That's great. It's definitely a success story for the city. Tell us a little bit about the cost of living. What do you think, or do you know what the median price is for a single family home or condo in Detroit? And how affordable is real estate for retirees?
So, I mean, I think real estate in general in the city of Detroit is still affordable. It has gone up a lot from a percentage perspective over the past several years. I mean, you used to see in the news how you can buy a house for $1. So obviously it's gone up a lot considerably since then. But I think the average price for a home in Detroit is still about $100,000, around the $100,000 mark.
Wow.
But it really obviously depends on the location and the neighborhood you're in. The neighborhood I'm in is much more expensive than that. But, so when we bought our house, we were lucky to buy it at the time because the prices have just skyrocketed here. We wouldn't be able to afford to buy a house now in this neighborhood. So I think there's a lot of options from different income levels. And to buy a house, there's adjacent neighborhoods to us that the homes still range around, that are really wonderful neighborhoods, and you can still buy a house for around $300,000.
Wow, that's really,
and they're really nice neighborhoods, really safe. And then with apartments, I did a little bit of research because I obviously don't rent, but I think the average price right now for a one-bedroom apartment is around $1,500 in the city of Detroit. Now, again, that depends on the location.
Right.
But a lot of the building that's going around with apartments is in downtown and also the Midtown area, especially the Midtown area.
Great.
So there's
Sounds
been
like it's still affordable.
Yeah. Relatively affordable. Yeah.
Yeah. And it has definitely come back. So All right.
I think like a
How
one bedroom condo goes for about low 300s. You could probably find something like high 200s, but a one bedroom is probably around low 300s.
It's pretty good.
Yeah.
Yep. How about grocery and utility bills? What would you say? Is it on par with the national average? Would you
I
think?
think
Is
it
it a little
is.
cheaper?
I think it's on par with the national average. There's some options. There's like it's not a Walmart. It's called Myers, which is similar to a Walmart. So it's the big with the groceries and then everything else that you want to buy from clothing to hardware and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So there's that option, which is the more affordable. But there's the Trader Joe's. There's all the other type of I'm blanking out right now. I can't think of the one that we shop at right now. Anyway, Whole Foods. So Whole Foods
Okay.
is the Whole Foods downtown as well, which is extremely popular. And there's the other ones too that pretty well known nationally as well. So and there is a focus on also expanding more on accessibility to groceries because years ago there were food deserts.
Hmm.
So now there's some like food co-ops that have been opening up also in the city of Detroit to improve the situation in certain areas where there are some food deserts.
Okay. And how about utilities, electric, gas? You think that's on par?
I think it is, with the exception of water. So that's my own complaint is that water is more expensive here in the city of Detroit than it is in other places that I've lived.
Is that
And I
because you can't drink it?
no, it's because the water system that is currently being worked on and upgraded, as I mentioned earlier, like along with the storm drains, was originally built for a population of like 1.7 million. And the population dropped considerably since then. So they're still maintaining a system for that many people. So they're going through a lot of upgrades and stuff. And so the water, I think, is much more expensive here than it is what I've experienced of living in New Jersey and then also in Chattanooga. So,
What's the population now?
so the population right now, I think, is around 675,000. And it actually, for the first time last year, the population has gone up. So in the first time in 65 years, the
Wow.
population has gone up. So that's another good sign, obviously, of the turnaround that people are moving back slowly into the city of Detroit. For us
Awesome.
personally, in our neighborhood, we've noticed a lot more families here since we moved here. In this neighborhood, there's a lot more children, which is also another really good sign when you start
Yeah.
seeing kids and young families moving back to neighborhoods.
Yeah.
That's a really positive sign.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It's becoming what it used to be, if
Right.
not better.
Yep.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about healthcare. Healthcare is so important for retirees, especially as we get older. We tend to use it more often. Tell us about, is there a hospital close by? Is how far is it from you? And also to get into a doctor like your PCP, does it take how long does it take to get an appointment? Is there a shortage of doctors per patient?
Yeah. So the medical system here in the Detroit area is rated very highly because there's a lot of options that are affiliated with the University of Michigan, and there's also a cancer institute known as Karmanos. So there are a lot of options in the city of Detroit and right immediately outside the city. There are some really top-notch medical facilities. I personally, 3 years ago now, discovered I had cancer, and so had surgery and stayed at Carmanos. I went to Carmanos. I did my research, got like 3 or 4 opinions, interviewed a few doctors, and decided on Carmanos in downtown Detroit, and I got excellent care there.
Oh, great.
Yeah. There's also a facility known as Corktown Health, which actually, admittedly, I've only discovered this like a week ago or two, a few weeks ago, let's say. And Corktown Health is, I'm just going to read out what I've looked up, but it's an advanced healthcare system for the well-being of all with a focus on the LGBTQ community. It's been there for a few decades, and it's in the Corktown neighborhood area of Detroit, which is seen also a lot of renovations going on in that area, and it's become a very desirable area to live. And so they have a big focus on the LGBTQ population in Detroit. And just last week, we attended a gala for Corktown Health. That's why I know a little bit about it, because we were invited to attend that gala. So their main services are on aging, behavioral health, financial assistance, fitness, nutrition, medical care, PrEP, tobacco cessation. So all different forms of healthcare are
That is
available.
awesome.
Yeah, and now they just announced that they're opening a second location just outside the city limits of Detroit, but it's in the Detroit metro area. So yeah,
That is awesome, because
yeah,
oftentimes the LGBTQ community, it differs from the heterosexual community as far as
sure,
healthcare is concerned. They need different things.
right, yeah.
So that's awesome. That's
Yeah,
great to have.
my partner and I were actually discussing now switching to Corktown to get that type of service, and because it's so close, and we really just like their mission.
Yeah,
And,
absolutely.
and it's for all income levels as well, which is
That's great. And do they accept insurance?
yes, yes, mm-hmm.
That's even better.
Yep,
And Medicare, I'm sure, for seniors.
right, yep.
Okay. And how far is the nearest hospital to you, do you think?
Let's see. Well, Hermanos is 4 miles from my house.
That's not bad. Takes a few
Yeah.
minutes.
Yeah. So, but I think there are a few other hospitals. And there is another hospital right near Hermanos, and it's right next to it. So it's also 4 miles to get there.
And does it take, if you need an appointment with your P or specialist, does it take a long time to get in, or a couple of weeks?
I haven't had too much experience in that. We go to a clinic nearby. It hasn't been difficult to get an appointment at all. I do need to see a specialist for something else in the near future, and that's been pushed out. That specialist, I didn't have anything available till mid-November, and I made that appointment about 2 weeks ago. So that's maybe
It's not too bad.
Yeah.
I mean, it's doable.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
because
Yeah.
in Phoenix here, it's pretty quick. I'd say a couple of weeks to, especially if you're a new patient. If you're a new patient, it usually takes a little bit longer. I think they put you on the bottom of the list as far as appointments. Okay, so that's pretty much average that everyone else.
Yeah, and when I was doing my research and meeting with doctors for my surgery, cancer surgery, I didn't have to wait long at all. I got to see all the
That's good.
doctors pretty quickly.
That's good.
Yeah.
Hope you're okay now.
Yeah, I am.
That's great. That's great. Let's talk a little bit about the LGBTQ community in Detroit. You mentioned the healthcare. Do they have a community center? Is there a gayborhood, so to speak? Do they have gay bars? Any restaurants? Do they do Pride?
Yes, all of the above. So yeah, so there is a kind of a community center called Affirmations, and it's in the heart of the neighborhood of Detroit, which is actually outside the city limits of Detroit. So it's in a town called Ferndale. And so Ferndale is literally a mile, or it actually borders the city of Detroit. So it's only about a mile from our house, but it actually borders Detroit. The actual neighborhood was originally in the city of Detroit, in a neighborhood not too far from where we live. It was called the Palmer Park section, which was all high-rise apartment buildings. And we always hear stories from all our friends that have been here all their lives, they're retired now, and they all talk about how that was the neighborhood, and that whole area was surrounded by gay bars back in the 70s into the 80s. And then when the city went into this decline, The gay population moved out over just across the border into Ferndale.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So they all moved and
And
gentrified Ferndale.
exactly. Because Ferndale was not known to be a very good place to live, I guess. But now it's just a wonderful town.
Wow.
And
See
they,
what the gays do?
yeah, I
We we do it
know.
all the time. Hey,
Yeah.
let's find a place that needs gentrification, and
Right, exactly.
there they go.
I think one of the reasons too back then was because because the crime was getting really bad. They weren't
Hmm.
also getting the support that they needed
Hmm.
from the police. Back in the 70s and 80s, they were not treated well like many other cities at that time.
Yeah.
So that's when a lot of the gays left the city of Detroit. But with that said, with that being, Ferndale is known to be the neighborhood of Detroit. The neighborhood really is much larger than that. I mean, there are other towns that are adjacent to Ferndale that are well-known neighborhoods as well,
Hmm.
and then Detroit as well, like the neighborhood that we live in. There are many other gay couples living in our neighborhood, and that's also increased a lot since we've moved here 8 years ago. So it's like the whole Detroit metro area is has a very large gay population. So there's not just like one specific neighborhood or town that is considered or like a safe space for the LGBTQ. It's like this whole metro area is like that.
So every place in Detroit is pretty much gay
Yep,
friendly.
it is. It is very much so. And there's also a lot of different income levels in with those different towns that are part of that. There's a lot of different income levels as well. So there's some homes like Ferndale is still very affordable comparatively to other towns that are adjacent to Ferndale, which are much more expensive and where a lot of gays also live. So there's a lot of affordability, and then there's the more upscale type of neighborhoods as well.
We didn't touch on taxes. So property taxes and state tax and sales tax. Can you give us a general
Property
idea?
tax can be high depending on where you are, and also, of course, with the size of home you have and that sort of thing plays into it. So we bought a house where a lot of homes in Detroit have it's the neighborhood enterprise zone designation, and the sellers had that with this house before they sold it to us, and it was transferable. So we have that now as well, and it's where the city gives you, I think it's 16 years of a reduced tax rate, and
Like an abatement?
it was intended to revitalize the
Hmm.
city. That was something that was introduced, about, I guess, about 20 years ago or so.
Hmm.
And ours just ran out, but before it ran out, we also had one more opportunity to renew it. So I
Hmm.
reapplied for it and renewed it. So it's now good for another 18 years.
Wow.
But after that, it's not going to be available anymore. So right now, our tax rate is lower. The one drawback is because in our neighborhood specifically, because of the prices have gone up considerably on the homes in our neighborhood, they've been reassessed.
Oh, okay.
And so what happens is if we decide to sell, the homes will get reassessed at that point, and the buyer is going to have to be prepared to pay a much higher tax
Tax.
rate than as opposed to what we've been paying.
So it's
So
not transferable, that rebate
I don't believe in
abatement.
this. Yeah,
It's
yeah,
not transferable to somebody
right,
else. So
right.
give me an idea. Give me a rough idea. How many square feet do you have in your home?
So the home is 6,300 square feet.
Wow.
Yeah,
That's
so it's a big house, big old house. If you know anything about Detroit, the architecture is incredible in the city of Detroit.
to me, that's a mansion.
Yeah, well, I guess. If I mean, so our house is kind of like on the average in our neighborhood. Believe it or not, there are homes
Okay.
that are 20,000 square feet in the
Un-
neighborhood.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, there are some really spectacular homes in this neighborhood. And there's our neighborhood, and then there's other neighborhoods in the city of Detroit too that are just as beautiful. There's big old homes throughout the city. In the 1920s, up until it was like mid 1950s, it was known as one of the richest cities in the world
Hmm.
at that time. There was an incredible amount of wealth here. So a lot of people recognize that these homes were built with extremely high quality materials that are completely unaffordable. So, I mean, we have replacement insurance on our house. So if our house should burn down, it should be we should be able to rebuild the house with the same details
Right.
and quality that our house has now. And it's like literally like I don't know, 10 times more than what we bought the house for
I'm
in
just,
terms of value.
I'm
So
even admiring your walls. Even your
yeah,
walls are beautiful.
yeah, thank you. So I mean, some of the homes, our home does not have it, but some of the homes in the neighborhood, it's extremely elaborate with marble and incredible carvings and woodwork, and
Wow.
I mean, just incredible. So
So
we
for,
get to see a lot of the homes inside because there's a monthly cocktail party
oh, wow.
in the
Is it a
neighborhood.
gay thing or is it
No,
just a
it's the
neighborhood
entire
thing?
neighborhood. So our neighborhood is 300 homes. And it's
Wow.
just for our neighborhood. It's a monthly cocktail party, and it rotates to a different house. Depends on the homeowner whether they have to volunteer to do it. So it's a wonderful way to get to see the inside of some of these big old
Oh,
mansions.
yeah.
So
And meet
yeah,
your neighbors.
right. And it's actually we actually started this event 6 years ago
Oh,
in the
that's great.
neighborhood,
You
and
go, boy.
yeah, and we passed it off now for someone else to manage it about 3 years ago, and it's hugely popular, and it's just made the neighborhood much more close knit. Yeah, so and it's also an opportunity for when people are newcomers, they just moved into the neighborhood. That's an opportunity for them to attend one of these monthly parties and get to meet their neighbors. So yeah,
Okay, getting back to the square footage, you
I
said
know it's
60, how much? 63?
6,300 square feet.
So
Yeah,
6,300 feet. How much real estate taxes do you pay approximately?
I think right now it's around 7,000 a year that we pay.
So that's pretty good.
So I think it's like maybe around 7,500. I think it was lower when we first bought the house 8 years ago, obviously, but I think it's around 7,500 a
And
year
that's with your abatement.
with the abatement. Yeah,
But
so
that's
it'll
pretty
go up.
good because I know in California, I've been looking even at condos and they're less than 1,700 square feet. 1,700 might be large. And there's a $8,000.
Yeah, yeah,
So I think it's you're doing pretty well.
yeah. And like I said, but there's a lot of concern about when now that the homes have been reassessed,
How much?
that people might back out buying the house when they discover how high the taxes are going to be. So there's that concern. So
Yeah.
and it's more so in this neighborhood because of the homes being more expensive than in general than other
So it might be a
neighborhoods.
little tough to sell.
Right. Yeah.
But you know what? There's always a buyer. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the homes in this neighborhood are still selling. One just sold. Actually, two just sold in past 2 weeks or so.
in the
So yeah.
millions, I'm sure. Right?
Well, there's a story behind one of them, but so one house did sell just around 1 million. The other house is known as the largest house in the city of Detroit, and it's 40,000 square feet. And it's basically a white elephant based in the neighborhood and for the city.
What
But
does somebody do with how much stuff do you have to have in
it is
40,000 square
it
feet?
is absolutely massive. It's walking distance from our house, just down a few blocks. But so it sold about 5 years ago for about 2.7 million, and it was bought by a corporation in California. And then they were renovating it, and the person responsible or overseeing the renovation was an elderly relative of this wealthy family. and he died. And the younger relatives, the sons, I think, don't want any responsibility on this house. So they just then abandoned it in mid construction. And so they had put it up for sale for 8 million and could not sell it. They weren't paying their taxes on it. And then also weren't maintaining the exterior of the ground. So they were getting all these blight violations.
Oh boy.
So it is rumored that it was just purchased by an ex-CEO of a automotive brand company. I'm not going to give any more information on it because I was sworn to secrecy, but it was just purchased last week, and they just purchased it for under $1 million.
Wow.
Because they were so, I guess this family was so desperate just to unload it because they didn't want anything to do with it. So now they just purchased it, and they're going to hopefully complete the renovations on it because they actually had put several million into the house already. And it still needs, I think, another 2 million or so to complete it. But
40,000 square feet.
Yeah.
I can't even imagine. It's like going into a museum.
Yeah. And so the house was built for the Bishop Archdiocese of Detroit, but it wasn't funded by the Catholic Church. It was funded by a former wealthy family. There's still descendants living in the city, but it was built by the Fisher family, and they were known, their company was known as Fisher Body. So they were involved in the automotive industry early on and sold their company to GM, I think it was, back in the 20s. And at that time, they were billionaires. So they were just fabulously wealthy. There were 2 Fisher mansions in the neighborhood, 2 brothers that had built their homes. And then just across the street, they funded the Bishop Mansion. So that I always joke that they were buying their way into heaven.
Jac, if you're ever near those mansions or those homes, snap a picture and send it to me.
Yeah.
And I'll put it on Instagram because I am just like, I want to see what one looks like. I want to see what yours looks like. So
those homes are just incredible, you know. But the Fisher Mansion just sold a few years ago to a former COO of Stellantis. He's no longer with Stellantis, which is more known as like Chrysler or FCA, but now it's owned by this auto company called Stellantis. And that house, he bought it about 3 years ago, I think it was, and he bought it for $5 million.
Wow.
So, yeah. So that's because we've been reassessed because of these big sales, although those homes don't, you know, my house is 6,300 square feet. That house is over 20,000 square feet.
Wow.
So, and then
That's
there's
incredible.
a lot of homes in between in those 2 sizes. So
that's incredible. Getting back to our LGBTQ community, do you know if there are any like social groups catering to retirees or the senior?
I don't know of any special groups, but there are still some gay bars in Detroit and Detroit Metro that have been around for decades, where I know a lot of like the more senior gays hang out at. So I know that there's these informal social groups where they get together every week on a certain day because we've been invited to them. But formal groups, I'm not aware of. There may be some formal social groups, but I'm just not aware of them personally.
Okay.
So, yeah.
It kind of seems to me like you do have a vibrant gay community there.
It's very vibrant. One thing I didn't mention is that like my bio, when I left the New York City metro area, I moved to Chattanooga, and it was for a job opportunity. And when I lived there for the 6 years, although I loved living there, it was very difficult to make friends. It was just and meet other gay people. And even the gay population there was very cliquish, has that Southern mentality. But I did love living there. When we moved here, it was completely different. All it took was just meeting 1 or 2 people, and we were introduced to this whole network of people. And we have this huge network of friends that we get together with on a regular basis. And we're part of the theater. We buy season tickets now, and all get together every couple of months or so and for dinner and go to the next show, Broadway show that's playing in Detroit, that sort of thing. So, excuse me, we've made a lot of friends in the area. So it was just so much easier to connect with people here as opposed to where we were in Chattanooga. So it's just, I guess, that Midwestern
Yep.
way
I always say everybody is kind in the Midwest
yeah.
or kinder.
And yeah, and I didn't experience that cliquish mentality, like you're not from here sort of mentality, where I did in the South. So, like I said, we made friends so quickly here. Within the first couple of months, we were being invited out by different groups of friends to go to bars and restaurants or attend parties, that sort of thing. And it just kept expanding from there.
That's great.
Yeah.
It's very important as we get older. We need good friends with commonalities. All right. Let's talk a little bit about transportation and walkability. Is Detroit at all walkable, or is it the downtown?
It depends where you are. The downtown, midtown area, both are very walkable. There are some other neighborhoods that have access to more like a main street section of their neighborhood. So one thing is that Detroit is 140 square miles. So there are neighborhoods that are still completely empty because of the population decline. There are still areas of the city, let's say, that are completely empty. And then there's like neighborhoods like ours that either have completely come back or been able to survive the downturn and come back. So there are other neighborhoods that have more accessibility to shops and restaurants that are walking distance. Our neighborhood, that's the one drawback, that we're kind of like, the closest thing was about a mile walk to get to like restaurants and bars. We wish there was something closer. But other neighborhoods in Detroit, our favorite is the Midtown area. There's the walkability score, I guess you could say, is really high there, and the bikeability as well. From a public transportation, that's probably one of the better areas to be in, is the Midtown and downtown area, which is another reason why my partner and I say if we wanted to stay here and downsize, like to a small home or condo, Midtown would definitely be the area because there's just so much available there in terms of restaurants and shops and grocery stores. And then also there's public transportation there.
What type? Is it buses or subways?
There's the bus system,
light rail.
system and light rail. Yeah.
Okay.
There's a light rail that was installed about, I think, 5 years ago now. And it only goes out from the downtown area. I think it only goes out about 4 miles from the downtown and then does that loop. So the neighborhoods that are adjacent to it or close within walking distance are very popular now because of the light rail. I think eventually they will expand it. It's just getting the proper funding for it. And the light rail is free also. And we've utilized it now a few times. We'll have something downtown to attend, but we'll park and go to a restaurant on the outer area of downtown where it's cheaper to park and then just jump onto the light rail, which is free, and then get to our event. So
I think the gays have to come in and kind of gentrify these empty areas too, these empty neighborhoods. Build it up a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Exactly.
Okay. So light rail, do they have, like, if you're in Midtown, do you have access to walking to grocery stores, supermarkets? Yes. You have access to walking to a pharmacy?
I don't know.
Maybe the pharmacies are in the grocery stores.
Yeah, I don't know. Possibly. I don't know about pharmacies exactly. I know there are pharmacies dotted around. I don't know if you've heard in the news recently, but a lot of pharmacies are shutting down, and they have targeted Michigan as one of them, like Rite Aid.
Oh, really? Rite Aid.
And there was one really close to us in Detroit. So that one I know has closed down, but they've closed down the entire state of Michigan as well. So there's that concern with some of the major chains closing down, and they tend to hit hard in the more diverse neighborhoods. So there's that concern. But there are some mom and pop pharmacies as well. which we discovered one recently that we've decided to switch over to. So
Yeah, you don't see much of that anymore. It's just
yeah,
usually Walgreens or
right. Yep.
CVS.
Yep.
Okay. So walkable areas, but you need a car where you are.
You do. Yeah, you
Generally need
do.
a car. Yeah,
You do.
because who
If
wants to walk a mile in the freezing weather also
Right. So if we eventually move to the Midtown area, we could essentially get by
with that?
without a car if we don't need to drive to an office. You need to go to work in an office, then you would have to have a car. But if you have the flexibility to work from home, or you're retired, fully retired and not working, you could definitely get by without a car living in the Midtown and downtown area.
I'm for that.
Yeah,
I'm a
me too.
walkable type guy coming from New York City.
Yeah.
Talk about arts and culture and entertainment. Are there theater, live theater, museums,
So,
opera you mentioned?
so there's an incredible amount of culture and arts in the city of Detroit, and it's due to the fact that the city of Detroit was one of, as I mentioned earlier, one of the wealthiest cities in the area, in the country. So it was funded by a lot of benefactors of that time, obviously the Fords, but many other very wealthy families at that time. So we have the Detroit Institute of Arts, which is the major art museum in Detroit, in the city of Detroit. And past couple of years, I think it was in USA Today last year, and for 2024, it was rated as the best art museum in the country.
Wow.
And it is. It's just a wonderful, wonderful art museum. And we always take out of towners that have come to the city of Detroit for the first time. We always take them there to see this one famous mural there that's in the DIA called Diego Rivera's Court. It's a famous mural painted and funded by the Fords at the time in the 1920s. And it's a courtyard, indoor courtyard, and the whole outer area is a massive mural on the auto industry in the 1920s. And there's a lot of really great history behind it because of Diego Rivera. He was a socialist at the time. And so there's some socialist messages built in within the mural. So at the time, many people wanted to have that mural torn down. And thankfully, the Fords, Edsel Ford actually, resisted the movement to have it removed. And now it's a huge tourist attraction to go see that because Diego Rivera was married to Frida Kahlo, which was a famous painter, Mexican artist. And they lived in the city of Detroit while he was painting his mural for, I think, a good year. They lived here in the city of Detroit. So there's a lot of history around that as well. There's also the theater. We have Broadway Detroit. And so we get season tickets for that. The next one is next week, actually, next Thursday.
Is that like traveling Broadway?
Yeah. And so we have a group of friends that we buy season tickets with, and routinely we get together for dinner before that, and then we go see the show for that for those tickets for that night. There's also the opera, which was brought back several years ago, and because there was always the Detroit Opera, but I think during the downturn it disappeared, but then it was brought back, and so we have tickets for that tonight actually to go see La Traviata, which I'm very excited about.
Oh wow.
But yeah, and it's opening night. So we have tickets for the opera tonight. And then there's a lot of other smaller things that go on. There's Cabaret 313, which is a nonprofit organization that brings in cabaret type of performances, and it's in a smaller venue. It's only like I think 150 people, and you get tickets, and they're really affordable. And we have a group of friends that also buy tickets for that. We just attended one about 2 weeks ago, which was really fun. So there's just an incredible amount of arts in the city of Detroit. So yeah.
See, and you mentioned I caught Edsel Ford, and there was actually a person they named Edsel, where they named the car.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that was his name, was Edsel Ford. Yeah,
Edsel. Where else would you get that name from?
I'm hoping I'm not getting it wrong, but I'm pretty sure that was Henry Ford's son.
Oh, it makes sense.
Yeah, he was the one that actually paid for the mural to be painted. I know that one was done in New York City, I think it was, and it was funded by the Rockefellers at the time, and they were also pressured to get rid of it, and eventually that mural was lost. That was also a mural by Diego Rivera, and that one was lost. So thankfully, the one that we have in the city of Detroit
Was
survived.
saved.
Yeah, yeah,
Cool.
yep.
So, okay, lots of things to do with
Mhm.
arts and culture. So, anybody that enjoys arts and culture will be great
Oh
living in
yeah,
Detroit.
there's tons of stuff in Detroit.
Very good. How about dining and restaurants?
There's
What's the dining scene like now? Has it come back?
It's it's really incredible. I looked up, I Googled, I guess you could say, how many right now, and there's approximately something like 1,700 restaurants of all
Wow.
different types in the city of Detroit. So there's a lot of affordable options, and then there's a lot of really great fine dining options as well. We have a friend of many years that lives in California, and he was following a restaurant that we enjoy going to on special occasions that he's been following because he's a huge foodie.
Hmm.
He was following them on social media and flew out here to stay with us for a weekend just so we can go eat at this particular restaurant because it's really wonderful. So it's got a great food scene. It really does. I mean, for a while there was like we had to cut back a little bit because
I get
we were just eating out at some really wonderful places and it was just we had to just really cut back a little bit because of the calories and also because it's costly
Yeah,
too.
it's costly.
Yeah,
Do you think you have any Michelin star or
that's a good question. I haven't thought about that. I think there may be one or two. I would have to look that up, but I'm not really sure.
and it's diverse cuisine, like you can get pretty
Very
much
diverse.
anything
Yes. Yeah,
international.
Arabic, Indian, Italian, of course. There's even Cuban downtown. There's a section of Detroit known as Mexican Town, and it's a tourist destination, and it's all
I've heard.
Mexican type restaurants. There's this one street that has been completely renovated. It's kind of like a pedestrian slash still auto friendly type of, and it's lined with all these wonderful Mexican restaurants and bars and bakeries, that sort of thing too. And like I said, it's actually a destination to go to. So yeah, so there's that option as well. But yeah, there's a lot of different types of restaurants. There's Thai as well. So Detroit Metro has one of the largest Muslim or not Muslim Arabic populations outside of the Middle East.
I didn't know that.
So you probably have heard about Dearborn, which is a city outside of Detroit, and it's known as to have the largest Arabic population there outside of the Middle East. So there's a lot of really wonderful types of restaurants also.
Middle Eastern
Yeah, Middle
cuisine.
Eastern restaurants and cuisine from all different types. So there's, like I said, from going back from the diversity with restaurants, there's a lot of options there.
I wouldn't go hungry.
No,
So,
no, no,
okay,
yeah,
walkability. We got restaurants. We got
yeah,
arts and culture. We're doing well.
yeah.
We're doing very well.
And it's getting better every day.
It sounds like it.
Yeah.
It truly does. Let's get a little bit into crime and safety. I know Detroit had such a bad reputation and a bad
Mhm.
crime. Crime was pretty rampant
Right.
in
Yep.
previous decades. How has that changed, and what is crime like now?
So, like any city, a big city, you have to exercise some caution and common sense.
Yeah,
But the crime has been documented over the past several years as dropping. So now that the city has improved, a lot of the blight has been removed, a lot of homes have been reoccupied, that sort of thing. So the crime has been consistently dropping over the past few years. And then along with that, the population has gone up as well. So
do you have a homeless population?
The homeless population is very, very low comparatively to other cities in the country. So I came from the New York City metro area. I remember going to New York City, taking the bus or the train into New York, and literally like having to step over homeless people.
Yeah,
And I know that other cities like
they have the same issue.
San Francisco and Denver area
Phoenix.
and Austin. I was shocked when I went there a few years ago because I had been to Austin before and there was a gap there. And I went just a couple of years ago. I was shocked to see how many homeless were there. So we do have some, but it's a very low number. I mean, if you're downtown, midtown area, you don't really see homeless there. They're usually in the outer areas, like under a bridge at an intersection. And I was listening to public radio several months ago on a conversation or a study that was done on the homeless population in the country and the lack of housing because it's so expensive. And they noted that at that time that in Detroit, they had a very low homeless population and partly due to the affordability on housing. So that may play a part into
It may,
why
yeah.
it's low. Yeah.
I wonder if there are many squatters in the areas that are still have blight, like nobody's
There
occupied. I
are,
wonder if there are
yeah.
squatters living there.
There have been some cases of that I know of personally where there have been squatters, but I don't hear of it too much now. But I know of some instances several years ago where that was the case.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's another. So would you think, is it more, do you hear more of violent crime or is it more of personal crime like theft?
I think it's more of like break-ins, that sort of thing, attempted break-ins. I haven't heard of like violent crime now for a couple of years. There was one that really kind of shook a lot of neighborhoods. It was one violent crime that happened not in our neighborhood, but a neighborhood close to downtown. And there was a physician, but I think there was an arrest recently. It was someone he knew. So it wasn't like a random break-in
Right.
sort of thing. It was someone that he was acquainted with,
Yeah.
where it was and he was murdered in his house, and he was a physician. He lived in a gorgeous, big old Detroit house mansion, and it's in another neighborhood from here. But he's been recently charged with that murder. But again, it was someone that he knew. It wasn't like a
No,
random
right.
break.
It wasn't, yeah, like somebody woke up one day and said,
Right,
okay.
right.
Okay. All right. Do you see the city doing anything to improve crime?
Yeah, there's been a lot of education with the police, especially on how to react with certain crimes. When with the murder of George Floyd, a lot of cities were experiencing a lot of issues because of that. Protests and then some violence as well due to the protests. There really wasn't anything like that happened here. There was one instance where there was a police confrontation with a African American, and he actually went for his gun. This one person, and it was all caught on film. And the police officer shot him, and there was immediate protests here in the city of Detroit. But then they aired the body cam video immediately in the media that evening, which completely silenced everything
Right.
because it showed that the police were used proper
Defending
protocol.
themselves. Right.
Yeah, yeah. So,
Got it.
but other than that, our city here did not experience the same issues that other cities experienced during the George Floyd murder.
So if I was in a neighborhood like yours and I needed to take my dog out at 2 a.m, would I feel okay?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
So, absolutely. So
That's
I do like a loop walking around the neighborhood for exercise or jogging. And if I do one whole loop on the outer perimeter of our neighborhood, it's about 1.5 miles. And so you can definitely walk anywhere at night in our neighborhood and feel very safe. Yeah,
That's
absolutely.
important.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's great to hear. So as we wrap up, if someone from the LGBTQ plus community is considering retiring to Detroit, what advice would you give them?
Well, don't look at all the blight porn that was really popular up until like I guess several years ago, because a lot of that blight does not exist anymore. So don't listen to that narrative, but do your research. Absolutely, just do your research. There's a lot of options in the city of Detroit, and then immediately outside the city of Detroit on where to live. And there's a lot of different affordable options in terms of homes. If you love historic architecture, then Detroit is your city because there's some really just incredible, beautiful homes. But then also there's new construction as well. There's a lot of building going on in the city, mostly condos that are being built, and then also apartments for renting are being built for all different types of income levels as well. But yeah, definitely do your research on what appeals to you in terms of what you're looking for. If you're looking for a lot of exposure to the arts, theater, and restaurants, then as I mentioned earlier, the Midtown area, downtown area, and some of the other neighborhoods that are adjacent to it are definitely areas that you would want to live in, and also because of the public transportation that's available in those sections. But yeah, it's just definitely just I just can't stress enough. Just don't get caught up with the blight porn that was publicized a lot throughout the globe, really.
Oh yeah, when you hear Detroit, you used to like kind of cringe and say, "Oh,
Right,
Detroit,"
right.
but it sounds. I mean, it sounds very desirable right now.
It has become very desirable. Yeah, yeah. And like I said, there's areas that because by square miles, there are neighborhoods that basically have been completely abandoned and just have not been, there's just not that population growth yet to
Right.
really be able to fill up those areas. But some of those areas have now become large urban farms as well. So there's that movement that's going on. Apparently, Detroit has the largest urban farm movement going on in the country.
Wow,
So yeah, so there's
that's
that.
good to know.
Interesting note. One thing I didn't bring up also was the on access to food that I forgot was the Eastern Market. So the Eastern Market is close to the downtown area, about a mile or two outside, and it's been there since the 1800s. And it's a
Wow.
big, huge farmers market. And with the resurgence in Detroit, it has become hugely popular. You have to get there really early in the morning on the weekends to be able to even find parking, but it's hugely popular there as a farmer's market. And then also throughout the summer growing season for plants, because a lot of the growers have stations there where they sell plants. So it's immensely popular here.
That
So
sounds
that's
great.
another option also for Detroiters to access food as well.
That sounds great. So, what's one thing you wish more people knew about retiring in Detroit?
I guess it's the diversity with housing where there's a lot of options for affordable options, really affordable, or on the higher end too as well, which I think is what a lot of people don't perceive of for Detroit.
Yeah, I was very surprised. You not only your home, but that 40,000 square
Yeah,
foot home that
yeah,
shocked me.
yeah. And
So
there's some other, like I said, other neighborhoods too that are known for very large homes as well, and just incredible architecture too.
yeah, so there are options for every
Yep,
type of home buyer.
yep, exactly.
All right, that means people in the audience check out Detroit. So for climate change, not too bad. It's got everything: cost of living, it's got transportation, it's got arts and culture, it's got dining, and a great place to buy a home as well, and affordability. So
Mhm.
check it out. So thank you, Jac. Thank
Yep.
you for coming to the podcast. I appreciate all of the education you've provided us and our audience.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for inviting me, Mark.
You're very welcome. Take care.
All right. Take care. Bye.
Bye bye.
Thank you for listening to the Where Do Gays Retire podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, Please subscribe to our podcast and consider making a donation by clicking the coffee cup on any page at www.wheredogaysretire.com. Each cup of coffee that you buy costs $5 and goes towards helping us continue the podcast. Thank you for your continued support.